Bombs are dropping outside constantly. Young Alexei, who has just turned 18 a month ago, was packing his bags in order to leave his city with his family. Suddenly, the doorbell rang. As he opened the door, there he saw a postman holding a letter. As soon as Alexei took the letter, the postman ran down the stairs as if he had a ton of other letters to post. Alexei went inside his room and looked at the letter. It was from the Central Ministry of Defense. As he opened the letter, only 2 lines were written there, stating,
Mr. Savostin, you have been requested to join the Ukrainian armed forces in order to serve your country at its worst time on your own will. The Russians are outside the city gate. Your help is needed.
Signed by the Chief of Staff of Ukrainian Armed Forces.
Don't even think about it, son,
said his mother from behind, wiping her tears. Alexei stood silent. The anticipation of Russia's invasion of Ukraine started from the early year of 2014, when the controversial presidency of Viktor Yanukovych ended after a series of protests in support of the European Union. Although Russia claims that they had no connections with the person during his presidential period, many government reports and people claim that he had strong ties with President Vladimir Putin and was not willing to show interest in joining NATO. It was also claimed that he made a fortune along with his family members, was the backbone of many corruptions, and was able to flee Russia after he lost his reign. The diverse civil groups in Ukraine have divided their living areas in 3 different parts. The eastern part of Donbas, where the Russian-speaking majority lives, the western part, where the ethnic Ukrainians live, with a living standard similar to the west, and the central part, where both the ethnicity live. Tensions between Russia and Ukraine started to rise when Russia invaded Crimea, attacking Ukrainian soil for the first time. Both the European Union and the United Nations criticized it, but Russia claimed that this state is willing to join their country and voted in its parliament, winning more than 70% votes in their favor. After Volodymyr Zelensky became the president, tensions rose more as he was an interested one to join NATO and keep ties with the West. But the Russian Federation was not fool enough to neglect him as a threat. As a result, Russia launched a full-scale invasion on Ukraine in February 2022. President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine commanded the citizens of Ukraine to fight until their last one. President Vladimir Putin of Russia stated virtually that his country would fight until they get hold all of Ukraine. The first attack was executed in the Luhansk and Donetsk province in eastern Ukraine, where most of the population consists of native Russians. Occupying those provinces and recognizing them as 2 independent nations, the Russian forces advanced towards western Ukraine, keeping Kyiv, the capital, the main target, making it visible that the war has started. Young Alexei, who joined the armed forces despite being obedient towards his family, took position along with his fellow members of the 18th Regiment of Land Forces at the border gate of Kyiv. Heavy airstrikes started destroying buildings in important cities like Kharkiv, Mariupol, and Kyiv. It was assumed that the Russians will be able to reach the capital after a week of the invasion, and unfortunately, they did reach, coming from the Belarusian border. The day when the Russians reached, Alexei, along with his regiment, faced a heavy gunfire situation for nearly a couple of weeks. Although guerrilla tactics were used significantly, nothing was coming in use. As a result, the Irpin Dam of Dnipro River was opened in order to create a large flooded basin on the border of Kiev, defending it through natural resources. But the casualties which was caused at the beginning of the gunfire was huge. Unable to capture Kiev due to shortage of supplies, excess time consumption, and casualties of soldiers, the Russian forces stepped back on 3rd of April. However, on 8th of April, the country officially announced that its forces will not capture Kiev anytime soon and are focusing on capturing the western side of Ukraine in order to cut Ukraine's supplies from the west, from where heavy Western weapons and humanitarian supplies are being sent into the country. The invasion has received widespread international condemnation and criticism. Both the United Nations and the International Court of Justice ordered Russia to suspend military operation in Ukraine, and the Council of Europe has expelled Russia. Not caring about the economic sanctions put by the US and its allies, Russia is still determined to take full control of Ukraine. Due to the war and sanctions, economic crisis and inflation has taken a devastating role in many countries, especially in the developing countries like South Asia and least developed ones in Africa. Situations have been turned upside down. Although Western allied nations have gathered troops in airfields such as Ramstein in Germany and at Polish borders, their steps are not being very helpful for Ukraine's resistance. President Volodymyr Zelensky has been criticizing constantly of Western countries not helping Ukraine on field, whereas Belarus is acting as the ally on field for Russia and China being the sleeping giant, watching the steps of both sides carefully. How the war will go on, how sanctions affect the war, and how the world leaders will prevent the situation from getting the world into a world war again, the world will get to see itself soon. Ukraine, on the other hand, is still in the resistance, with President Zelensky being the commander-in-chief situated in Kiev. But how many people and how much time will the war swallow to mark its end? Maybe one day it will be known, but not anytime soon. At the Polish border, it was being declared that the 15th Regiment of the Land Forces were coming on a holiday for 2 days. Being known to the fact that Alexei was a member of the very regiment, his mother ran towards the trucks in which the soldiers of the regiment came. Getting over with the crowd, Mrs. Savustin stood first of the crowd to meet his son, who promised he would come back. The woman looked on 2 soldiers who were carrying down a coffin covered with the flag of Ukraine and written on its wooden cover, "Fought with glory, sacrificed for the country, Honorable Alexei Savustin." War is a cowardly solution to the problems of peace, said by Thomas Mann. Hey guys, if you like the audio, do consider following our Instagram page for more and share the audio. Thank you for being with us.